virtual worlds for the Warfighter, the next generation of Army training. My name is Sean O'Keefe. I'm part of the team here at the Army Applications Laboratory, and I'll be your MC and moderator for today's session. I'm a civilian and come from the startup world, so hopefully that explains my uniform today. Speaking of, who else is here from the startup world? A quick show of hands. Entrepreneurs. All right, investors, defense integrators, and others in the industry. All right, good. So good mix. It's always good to get a good sense of the community in the room, so thank you for that. To kick things off today and introduce our special guest to deliver opening remarks, I'd like to introduce AAL Director, Colonel Lynn Rosenhoff.
Thanks, Sean. Hey, thanks. Hey, can everyone hear me? Yep. I'm not sure if this thing's working. First off, thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us on this really tremendous day, very special day for all of you out there. 75th anniversary of D-Day. Absolutely perfect day to get things kicked off here. Thank you, Capital Factory. They've got an event later on this afternoon. Thank you for allowing us to hold our AAL event right now. Like I said, it's a really special day, and I think today will be one of many days where you're going to see the Army Applications Lab and really, quite frankly, Army Futures Command break down walls and really figure out how to connect soldiers like Cody Palmer right here, Specialist Palmer, industry, and the folks actually writing the problems. We hope today is one of many days where we can replicate this, so we're happy to do that. But to kick things off, I'd like to introduce the Chief of Staff of the Army Futures Command, Jay Gallivan, Brigadier General Jay Gallivan, Career Armor Officer, 27-ish?
Quick count.
Yeah, 27 years in the Army. Here to talk about Army Futures Command, and I would welcome this opportunity for the audience to really engage, ask questions, folks. I know there's a lot of interest in Army Futures Command, who we are, what we are, and kind of why we're here. So without further ado, General Gallivan.
Come on up here, Sean. Come on up here. Take a seat. I'm Jay Gallivan. I'm an Army soldier, and I'm looking for, where's the innovators and startups? Raise your hand. Okay, keep your hands up, please. I'm begging you. In the Army, we don't use umbrellas, so I'm soaking wet. So I'm looking for disruptive technology that allows me to run in the rain and stay dry. Keep your hands up. All kidding aside, and Len talked about 75th anniversary of D-Day, and across the world, but definitely for Americans, pretty neat that we're here today. When you look at those wonderful, can everyone hear me? When you look at those wonderful soldiers that fought through adversity on a scale that we can't even comprehend, that wear the uniform now, Iraq and Afghanistan pales in comparison. And the innovation those soldiers had to use to do what they had to do to secure freedom across the globe. So pretty cool day to be here with all of you. Specialist Palmer, thank you for being here. Where are you posted at? Fort Riley?
Yes, sir. I'm from Fort Riley, Kansas.
All right. Are you falling in love with Austin?
It's a decent place, sir. I think I'll go back to Kansas, though.
You gonna buy some boots? All right. You got to buy boots. Who here has not heard of Army Futures Command? That helps.
I've got one hand. Hold on a second, sir. You got
one hand.
One honest hand, anyway.
One honest hand, because that helps. Because what I'd rather we do is we have a conversation today. Do you mind? So I'm going to try to limit my comments to about 5 minutes max. And then instead, let's have a conversation. And a lot of you can contribute to the narrative and why the Army got to where it is now. Joseph Copser in the back could probably tell a better story because he's been on every side of it. Industry, small business, large business, you pick it. Big picture broadly, the character of war has changed. And you know it as well as the United States military does. The next major conflict, which we hope to not have, and we still focus on deterrence and prevention of conflict and finding the competition space short of conflict. But if there is a conflict or in the competition space, it's fundamentally changed. Artificial intelligence, autonomy, biology, robotics, quantum information, what many of you are part of, that's a consequential change that we've acknowledged the reality, as opposed to relying on a near perfect understanding of the character of war, I think this is a good news story for you, in particular if you're a U.S. citizen, that your Army is acknowledging reality as opposed to seducing ourselves into false aspirations about what conflict might be about if we were to unfortunately have to be involved in conflict, which no one in the military wants to be involved in conflict. At least my 30 years of service and almost 50 years of life, because I grew up in a military family. So this is all I know. And then I know Austin, which I love, if you're from Austin. But in addition, the YAFC, not just the character of war, that we acknowledge how complex and uncertain it will be, and uncertainty does govern it, even with technological changes. The other big factor is, for the Army, we had several institutional problems. We had industrial age processes. Who's ever heard of systems like the Abrams tank or the Patriot system or the Black Hawk? Raise your hands. Okay, you can put them down. On average, those systems took us up to 30 years to put in the hands of America's women and men. 30 years, 1960s, those big 5 equipment systems, the Apache, the Black Hawk, the Patriot, the Bradley, the tank, all those things that I've spent my life on, and some of you have, they were born in the 60s and they touched us in the late 80s. That's an industrial age process. It used to take the Army 3 to 7 years just to come up with a requirement for a new helmet or a new pair of boots, let alone a new way to solve decisions in an uncertain environment with long-range precision fires. And those requirements sometimes were reams of paper this high. So literally 3 to 5 years to say, I have a problem. Can you recognize that as a problem? And can we touch industry? And can we touch academia? Can we touch universities and get help? That's not acceptable. It doesn't keep up with the pace of change. Most of you probably operate on a 6-month horizon, and 2 years is long-term planning. Does that make sense? But 3 to 5 years just to say we have a problem, and then another 27 years to get the kit in the hands of a young woman or a young man. So we had industrial age processes. We didn't have one person, one entity driving modernization, and we didn't have unity of effort. And so what the Army did with Army Futures Command is they put visualizing and describing the future world, how we see the nature of conflict, and we're part of a greater system, part of the OSD with other services. We're part of a whole government effort, but inside the Army, under one place, Army Futures Command, a couple blocks up, you need an umbrella. I don't have one, I'm waiting on technology. We've got one entity that for the Army says, here's what we think the world will look like, here's what the future threat space will look and feel like, here's the capability gaps, why we're here and why we need you and your help and your creativity and your courage to give us a shot. Based on those capability gaps, here's how we're going to test and experiment. Here's how we're going to come up with a new capability, and then we're going to turn it over to the professionals that manage acquisition programs to produce equipment for women and men inside the Army, for the Joint Force potentially, and for our allies and partners. So that's why we have an AFC. That's the long and the short. And I could go on, but very few people other than one person raised your hand. But ma'am, have I answered your question why we have an Army Futures Command? Yes. All right, unity of effort, constantly innovating, constantly changing, attempting to integrate what you do, what our labs and decks do, constantly touching soldiers like this soldier early on as opposed to waiting till the equipment is in his hand and this specialist says, you know what, that's the dumbest set of boots I've ever seen. I'm going to go buy them online. What's your MOS?
11 Bravo, sir.
11 Bravo. Mechanized or light?
Mechanized.
All right, that means he travels around in a large Hulk called a Bradley. And there are some things about that Bradley that drive you nuts, doesn't it?
Oh, yes, sir.
What are 3 things that absolutely make no sense?
The fact that the driver's camera is set so that it can't move when you're driving and you have just the driver's camera up, you have no situational awareness. The only way for me to gain outside situational awareness is to switch to the VC or the gunner sights. the fact that our weapon systems are so minuscule compared to our future or opposition. So if you look at the Bradley, we have a 25mm main gun versus any other country's Murloc at 30s minimum, which is a bit of a difference compared to combat power-wise.
Okay, what's something else that drives you nuts?
Track maintenance.
Okay, can't help you with that, but let me see your hand, young man. Turn them over.
All right, you look pretty good. Have you ever put the 25mm cannon in operation or taken it out of that, Bradley?
Yes, sir.
Okay, what happens to your knuckles?
Oh, they get beat up.
All right, who knows what human factors are? Okay, human factors are things that empower or protect humans, right? Like a safety switch on your food processor, or a safety switch on your jigsaw, or a switch that protects you as you try to do something, or buttons that don't have haptic technology and we've gone beyond it, or the ergonomics. There's a space to go from the back of the Bradley to the front of the Bradley, and it's this corridor. We have a foul word that goes with it, but picture going inside your air conditioning duct to get to your winter clothes when you're swapping your summer and winter clothes out, those of you that live with their seasons. It didn't consider human factors. Stand up, specialist. You're about 6 feet tall.
Sir.
For you to get through that thing called the hellhole, you're gonna have to bend over, and if he's wearing body armor, helmets, gloves, night vision goggles that are 1950s on the top of his head, he's gonna break something of the government's or he's gonna hurt himself. So that's that constantly innovating, integrating with you, integrating with this specialist, because when you ask a young woman or man about a piece of kit, does it serve the purpose? They'll tell you in English. They're not going to be political. They're going to say, this works, this doesn't work. That's Army Futures Command in a nutshell. So what I'd rather do is we have a conversation. And most of it will probably put this great specialist to work. But let's open it up for dialogue. Anything we can talk about anything you want, or Sean, I'll let you moderate and take charge.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is quite a special treat. We weren't sure that you wanted to do a Q&A, so thank you for that. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Is this just for the Army, or is this for all the 3 or 4 divisions of the military?
It's only for the Army. We're not into teamwork. And what we want to do is we want to take the light and keep it under the bush, and it's a secret. You know, we classify everything. So that's it on that. No, all kidding aside, this is not just for the Army. It's not just for the services. It's not just for our allies. You look, a lot of the things that touch our country, that touch society, a lot of technology happened, some of it came from defense. Now you could argue that's turning. You look at artificial intelligence, cyber, other things, industry may be leading. And we knew we had to connect with industry. That the Department of Defense doesn't have a monopoly on innovation and creativity. But in the pure sense, this is to modernize the Army for 2028 and beyond. So we're looking beyond what we're doing now. But we know that not only is our dream that we never have to fight, we know that our goal is that when a young female infantry company commander in some future battlefield finishes a fight, she says, in 2018, the United States did the right thing and gave me the equipment I need to do my job and bring my women and men home, as many as possible. It's that. But beyond that, it's also for all of the military, it's for government, it's for allies, and a lot of this will benefit society. So it's much bigger, but this was started to improve how the Army modernizes, to make us agile and iterative and constantly self-assessing and improving, continuously modernizing. So it was for the Army, but there are some second and third order effects that could benefit every woman and man in this room. Hope I answered the question.
Yes, sir.
Other questions? Here we go. Yes, Silvani, you here?
You definitely mentioned on the time, you're looking at 30 years for things. Other than the BAA, what kind of things are you looking at doing to increase the speed so that if somebody comes with a cool idea, it gets out into the field?
Well, where do you come from? What do you do for a living?
With laser shot simulations, we're out of Houston, Texas.
Okay. You're going to have to help me answer the question. Please sit down. What's your name?
Sean Arsenault.
Sean? Okay, so we got Sean and Sean sharing the mic. First of all, we're not exclusively future. There are some problems today that this great specialist on a panel will talk about that if we, the community of purpose, can help today, we're all in for it. Len Rosenoff in the Army Applications Lab is here to take problems that we're having. And they could be a problem of today that this specialist could reveal that Len Rosenoff and the team say, wow, this is a smart guy. And the fact that his knuckles are pretty chewed up. We think we can try to get after that. But most of our focus is farther out because we know if you agree that the character of conflict, if it were to happen, has changed, we know we got to get out there. There are competitors out there that are planning. And we've spent the past 20 years focused on counterinsurgency. And you can't do everything well. You cannot do the dishes and vacuum the carpets at the same time. And so we decided, we've been doing a lot of dishes, let's focus on the carpet. So we are looking far. But I want you to know we're looking for solutions to problems of today as much as tomorrow. And Len has an open charter to take what the Army has problems with and to find help. So that's number one. How do we do that? We got to take some risk. We do need to make sure the science is right. This is not just about buying a new gadget. It's about finding a solution where the science is right and sound to help us build a new piece of equipment or a new piece of software. But also you have a role. You got to take some risk. And for some of you, your organization has the capacity to take risk, the financial means. And for some of you, you don't. And where you don't, then we've got to find through other venues. A great example is what Josh Baer does, and this is across the country, or like Mr. Joseph Kopser. Find someone who can partner to allow you to take some risk with us. So it's a shared risk. And it's industry, it's startups, it's academia, it's government, it's everybody's in this together. Does that answer the question? I'm not trying to be 30,000 foot and not answer it. If I don't answer a question, hold me accountable.
Hey, sir, I want to jump in. And I think, Sean, really what we do in the Army Applications Lab is help you through that process. So we're not going to point you just to a webpage, which is al.army, which is great. But really, the doors are open. I mean,
Len, what's that website?
That's right. I feel like it should be on my T-shirt. That's right. Nice plug. But really, I mean, there's a reason we're here. There's a reason we're in Austin. There's a reason that the Army Futures Command, the first time a 4-star command is west of the Mississippi in downtown Austin. And there's a reason that the Army Applications was put here, and that's to engage with folks like you, Sean. And I think what becomes really the test of Army Applications Lab is to work with folks like you and help you through what seems to be a pretty Byzantine system. I mean, it's cumbersome. And I know Joseph and every other VC out here would probably tell you to stay away from the Army. And we're hoping to change that paradigm. And if we can do that, we're a success. And the doors are open. So come on by. We've got an open house up until 9 o'clock tonight. We'd love to engage.
Sir, we're going to go with the gentleman in the back. You, sir, with the, yes, sir.
Hey, quick question. You're talking about the military tools, fighting tools. I'm from the medical field. I'd like to know what some of the challenges are in future combat preparedness or injuries. What are some of the priorities? Is that something you deal with, or is it just strictly battlefield?
No, I'm smiling because most of our problems, if you really want to think about it, who's ever served in one of the military services? Okay, keep your hands up for a second. It's all right. Keep them up right. Look around for those in the front row. Okay, and I'm going to ask you to put them down, and then we're going to do a little polling, like polling. And I'm not trying to be a smart aleck, sir. A lot of our problems are logistics. We in the military, we say logistics is for professionals, tactics are for amateurs. Sustaining ourselves. All of you have read, or you could Google, that when the military goes to war, there's this mountain of sustainment that follows it. And we've got to be agile, lean, and fast, and mobile. Medical is central to everything we do. So we have as much interest in medical capabilities for the future fight and for the current force, in chemical and biological capacity for the current requirements in the future. I talked the character of war is changing. We all know about infectious diseases. We think back to the great influenza, and that it's very probable that could affect some part of society, much bigger than Ebola. So we have absolute interest in problems, the broad problem of how do you care for the women and men in the force, care for women and men in a disease-prone or degraded environment. How do you deal with supply chain security? And it's not just in how do you get the truck to go from point A to point B safely, which we're interested in. How do you potentially, instead of putting 10 semi-trucks on the road with 20 women and men driving, maybe we can go where there's only one person driving and the rest of the trucks are autonomously linked. And we can put less women and men in harm's way. Someone's daughter, someone's son. What about how do you keep all the orders? In the military, we order a lot. We order a lot of stuff. What about the surety and security of that supply chain process so that what we order is secure, just like Amazon or any other company? So it is not all about the future infantry carrier or the future helicopter or the future cannon that can shoot far. It's about a future network. It's about a future training environment. How do we give this specialist the best environment that he can train in at home that replicates what he would do in combat under the most realistic conditions as practicable? Because right now, this specialist, to do his job as an infantry person, as an infantryman for this person, he's got some simulators, but they don't replicate the terrain and three-dimensional features like the place he's about to deploy to perfectly, do they? You've got some personal video games that are a little better, probably. I mean, it's true. But how do we allow, and by the way, it's very expensive for us to train. And a mechanized soldier, he spends a lot of money to go and shoot his Bradley. Why can't we create a synthetic training environment that allows him, with real-time feedback, central, not just to a video screen, but to his body, to his head, to his fingers, so that he can practice over and over in a simulation and not have to train as often. And when he does go do his job, he's confident and competent in the women and men on his left and right. So medical, huge interest. All things logistics or sustainment, huge interest, vitally important. Sir?
Along that lines, Matt, do you have a menu, an RFP, something to look at and say, these are the products and solutions you're looking for, and what would be the process in which we would approach you if we have solutions like these that we would offer?
The primary way, and I'm not, this guy's not buying me a beer tonight, I promise, but it's Len Rosenoff and the Army Applications Lab. And what Len is in the process of doing is talking across the force and understanding the problems. And where we need your feedback, and Len needs your feedback, all of you, is we build capacity on how to define a problem. Because if you let me tell you about putting a big 50-pound bullet into the back of a howitzer so we can shoot far, and I say, I'm looking for a robotic arm that can load a 50-pound projectile into a howitzer, you're not going to know what the heck I'm saying. But if you can help us define a problem, need the ability to autonomously move a 50-pound item that is 3 pounds in length inside of a 4x4 square foot space into a small tube, you can do that. But if I say how to load a 155 round into the back of a howitzer autonomous, you're going to skip that BA. So I will tell you that Len is one of the points of entry that we're focused on primarily. Sir?
We got time for one more.
One more. All right.
You had been very polite, so you good? All right.
Oh gosh, not Joseph.
Now, in all honesty, you talk about bringing the cultures together, so for this last question, I want to tee it up and let you all knock it out of the park. I know from experience there's a lot of civilian entrepreneurs who are intimidated literally, not by the person, by the uniform or the rank or the protocol. Help dispel all the myths about that and just make it so that they understand how easily it is to communicate across cultures.
Joseph, come on up here, brother. All the way. Come right up here, my friend.
All right.
But by the way, Joseph is a dear family friend of mine. The optic is helpful to dispel the myth. It's a community of purpose. It's you. It's us. It's this wonderful specialist who's 10 times brighter than the three of us. So, Joseph, I'm going to let you take a swing at your question, brother.
Well, I'd say the biggest thing is to remember that even though he may be a brigadier general and he may be a specialist or she may be a captain, at the end of the day, it is Jay and Janet and Brad or whatever it is. And if you're
Cody.
ever in doubt, Cody, if you're ever in doubt on how to best address anybody that you're working with, whether they be in civilian clothes or not, it's just by smiling and saying, hello. Honestly, that is the biggest thing we have to do as a community here in Austin, as an Army entity, as a defense innovation, is to realize that even though across the table there might be shorter hair than what you have, physically, than most of us, no beer guts, is the fact that at the end of the day, we have far more in common, and that what separates us, and we have a chance to solve these big problems. It requires letting a lot of that protocol and that fear of getting it wrong. It's okay if you call a Marine a soldier, it's a compliment. But the vice versa, see how I did that? Now vice versa may not be the same, but all the military lab. But as civilians, you don't have to worry whether you're talking to a Marine or an airman or whatever it might be. That's just the point I wanted to really drive home, because I know it's a concern for a lot of folks that are dealing with opportunities like this to help us innovate.
Amen. All right, I got one question for the audience. Does anyone have an umbrella? I'm kidding. Sean, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
God bless you.
Thanks,
Yeah, well, thank you so much, gentlemen. And I will attest to that. I have a background working with startups, come from the entrepreneurial space. This is my first gig working with the Army, and there are more commonalities than differences. So from that cultural piece, it's been a fantastic experience. So I encourage all of you entrepreneurs out there to get involved and serve your country. So thank you. Yeah, speaking of stealing thunder, a lot of my introductory remarks they covered, which is fantastic. But we are here to talk about what the Army calls synthetic training environments. Now, if you Google that, what do you think is going to come back, right? Just a bunch of military terms. It's not one that's widely used in the commercial world, but the phrase breaks down to a group of technologies that are very familiar in the startup and commercial world. Gaming, AR, VR, AI, machine learning, deep learning, all these are critical pieces to a synthetic training environment. So part of the reason we're hosting panels like these is to break down these barriers of understanding, create a bridge between military and industry, and ultimately build the world we want to live in. With that in mind, let's get started with some background on our very special panelists today. Gentlemen, come on up. All right. So the first seat here is Mike Canissaro, here all the way from Orlando. He's the systems engineer for enabling technology on the synthetic training environment cross-functional team. He's responsible for sourcing, deconflicting, and integrating key technologies into the synthetic training environment and develop the roadmap to expand the art of the possible. He's worked as a senior engineer for the Electronic Warfare Air and Ground Survivability Division at CCDC C5ISR, and was responsible for developing the investment strategy for air and ground electronic warfare centers and countermeasures. Thanks so much for being here today, Mike. Let's give a round of applause for Mike. On the far side is Mr. Frank Runn. Frank is the founder and CEO of HookBang, a full-service emerging technologies research and development firm whose mission is to augment human intelligence using machine vision, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and mixed reality. With many military contracts under his belt, Frank and team have partnered with some of the biggest companies in the industry, such as Google, Dell, and Intel. In 2018, they won numerous accolades, including being listed at number 390 on the Inc. 500 and being recognized as the fastest growing software company in Austin, Texas by the Austin Business Journal. So thank you. Let's give some applause. Last but not least, we have Specialist Palmer has done user assessments and some of the latest synthetic training environments will provide the all-important soldier perspective on the topic today. On this anniversary of D-Day, let's give a big round of applause to Specialist Palmer for being here.
here because of the service and sacrifice of men and women like Specialist Palmer. Thank you so much for your service, sir. Would you like to give a quick shout out to the crew back home?
Yeah. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope you have had fun on that fun run today.
Excellent, thank you. So yeah, so as you may have figured out, many back home are watching via the live stream. So we've got many more participating today. So it's great. All right. Well, first off, we don't like using acronyms here at AAL, which. But I must say, synthetic training environment cross-functional team is a bit of a mouthful for me. So can we all agree that when I say STE, I mean synthetic training environment, and when I say CFT, I mean cross-functional team. Are we all good with that? All right. Those are the only two acronyms I'll use today, I promise. So yeah, let's get started, Mike, with you. I want to talk a little bit about kind of the current state. I've heard of these laser tag systems that are being deprecated. There's lines of effort about reconfigurable trainers. I've heard about 57 current training formats. So can you talk a little bit about what the CFT's current mission is, what's happening there?
Sure. Can you guys hear me? So the focus is on modernization. So we have an aging training system, a series of systems that are have been developed decades ago using older technology. They were not designed with interoperability in mind. They were not designed to meet the training needs of. So we have several lines of effort, and you'll see that if you interface with other CFTs as well, they have lines of effort. And some of ours are focused on various aspects of the components that build up what we're calling the synthetic training environment. So one of those is something called One World Terrain. So we currently lack a database of terrain that allows us to create a synthetic environment in which a soldier can walk around to interact with the environment in high fidelity attributed 3D space. So we intend to take all source data, attribute it appropriately so that it is able to be used in a simulated environment and provide that out to the point of need. In addition to that, we will use that One World Terrain concept to be driven by training simulation software. So that is the back end that's doing the math. It's the gaming engine, if you will, using One World Terrain to sort of create the environment in which you operate. We're also developing hardware interfaces and software interfaces to the user. So training management tools will allow you to generate a scenario, perform the scenario and run it, monitor it in real time, and then perform automated after-action reporting and assessments based on the results of that training. And then from a hardware perspective, we're developing reconfigurable trainers for air, ground, and soldier-borne capabilities. And so those will be reconfigurable for various platforms and also for soldier use cases. So the emphasis really is on readiness, modernization of training systems in order to meet the needs of a modern battlefield, to include complex terrain, urban environments, megacities, complex jungle terrain, things like that, in addition to multi-domain operations. So working seamlessly between land, air, sea, space, and cyber. And so that's, in a nutshell, sort of what synthetic training environment CFT is chartered to do. And of course, that brings a lot of technical complexity, and there's no shortage of challenges involved, both technically and from an integration architecture standpoint.
Yeah, that is a huge piece of work there, so thank you. Now, I think like most people here, when I think of synthetic training environments, I'm thinking about video games, as you mentioned. Call of Duty, I'll keep in mind that my first game console was an Atari 2600, but Specialist Palmer, let's talk about, what was your first video game console and how does that translate to some of the synthetic, training environments that you're using today?
Okay, so the first game system I actually ever played on was a Sega Dreamcast. I'm currently playing on an Xbox One, and if you were to take my standard home game, it's so much better than even what we run here. For us to go to our virtual training simulator, we have to go to a massive building that takes all this time, and we go into what might as well be a small shipping container. And you sit down, you have your steering wheel, you have your shifter, but then graphic fidelity wise, there's no lay of the land. You know, you're running formations and your lead vehicle will just disappear off the map. You know, it's hard to practice real life situations and real life training when your lead vehicles are just there 1 second, gone the next. You can't see terrain wise. There's no way for me to know, hey, am I in defilade? Do I have cover? Am I fully exposed? Can they see me? You know, there's no interaction with the environment. And if you were to switch it to the squad level, bringing it back to the medical wise, we have no way to go in depth. So training wise, right now, if you were to be killed, so to speak, that's it. You just sit there. But in real life, there's so much more to the process. You set up security. You get lifeline. You call in 911 medevac. You make sure that you can do anything and everything you can to make sure this guy goes home with you safely. We can't simulate that in training. You know, if we lose a vehicle in our training environments, that's it. It's just a black screen until they resurrect you. There's no way to, hey, we just lost a vehicle, set up security, pull these guys out, call in the 911. Because that's what we would do. On the squad level, someone gets hit. There's no, hey, how is he bleeding? You know, you can't go into depth. And on the squad level, for training wise, once again, hey, am I in defilade? Am I covered? Am I concealed? Can they see me? It's just flat, barren earth. You know, I might as well be driving on the moon. And when you're doing a 20-click movement and you're driving on the moon, it's not that fun. It's really boring. You know, there's nothing to see. So that's some of the issues we currently have. So, like I said, just can get back to my modern Xbox.
It's a little different.
It's a little bit of a difference, yes.
Good, well, good. We'll dive into that in a bit. I mean, certainly a disconnect between what we're all assuming here. Well, Frank, I have a question for you. I mean, with the popularity of games like Pokemon Go and others, and this disconnect that we're talking about, like, you know, what is the value in your mind with augmented reality? You know, is it assisted reality? Is it something else? Like, you know, where do we need to go here?
So the last project we did was a 2-year research project with Google. We had a 20-person team doing R&D into mobile augmented reality. And so at the end of that, which ended last March, we tried to figure out, okay, same thing, what is the value of augmented reality? And we found a lot of it was more the novelty effect of why it was getting used. It was sort of entertaining, but really didn't add value. Really what we found, the main technical problem of augmented reality was that it was a machine vision problem. So for example, if you mentioned Pokemon Go, the problem is 1% rendering Pikachu, about 99% trying to figure out where to render Pikachu. And so really what that means is a contextual awareness problem. And so, for example, when you're rendering, where is the flat surface? What's the lighting? Is there anything occluding it? The environment is very complicated. And so when you have contextual awareness, what that allows you to do is essentially inject synthetic information to the scene, which is augmented reality. So if you subtract the entertainment value of it, yes, we kind of believe that the main thing is it's a frictionless access to information, and we came up with something called
might not be there in the real world, things like that, right? So attack vectors that we're assessing.
I was more concerned with the cyber compliance type issues
Right.
Associated with it, not just the technical.
Understood.
Yes. Not the environment, but when cyber compliance and your network guys get involved, and it has to meet, it's fully networked or integrated together.
So the complexities of that architecture and the cyber posture are both the STE's responsibility to help facilitate working with the cyber community and the network community. So the network CFT is also very integrated with us. We're building out and pushing some of the modernization that underpins and facilitates STE even existing. And so that is a joint effort between us and the network CFT and with industry. So there's a lot of complexity there, of course, and not all of it has been completely fleshed out, but we understand that there are compliance challenges that we will face, especially with so many disparate components. But we are working that as part of the architecture.
Okay, thank you. Good question, sir?
I have a question for the specialist. How long have you been in the Army?
So I've been in for about 2.5 years and just re-upped for another 4.
In those 2.5 years, to the conversation we're having today here on stage in downtown Austin, have you ever had anyone ride in your Bradley to ask these questions of the user community on the ground as you're going through your training? Has there ever been a technologist, whether it's from this unit or anyone else within the DoD or Army, actually within your riding vehicle as you're experiencing these use cases to inquire about the requirements?
So as far as I know, no. In my personal experience, no civilian or civilian contractor has ever ridden in my Brad. The only people I have had in my Brad are military personnel who are trying to do their job. Which, the way I look at it, as a driver, I am essentially Uber. My job is to safely get the dismounts to the fight and make sure they get to the fight safely. So as soon as I drop that ramp, they're ready to go. They're immediately taking buildings, they're taking cover, they're doing what they need to do to get the job done. They're seizing the terrain, they're taking the fight to the enemy. Because as soldiers, we don't want the enemy to bring the fight to us, we want to bring the fight to them. So as a driver, that is my job, to get our troops to that fight.
All right, other questions? Hi, gentlemen. I had a question as far as cost and value. So I understand there's a great deal of value in simulating equipment or simulations that might not be either ready to the soldier or too risky or expensive to provide at all times. However, for situations or scenarios or simulations that might be less expensive, such as sending soldiers directly to the field for training and taking buildings, do you feel like the simulations are worth it compared to field training if the field training provides more inherent value from the experience?
I can answer that. So we were doing a project with the 68 Whiskies. They are combat medics. There's a shoot house in San Antonio. They have 12 weeks to go through the course. When the shoot house itself, it's filled with fog and smoke. It's super loud. They play loud music. And because I think there's like 40,000 combat medics. It's only second to actually infantry, and they train about 7,000 a year. So they get a very short time to go through the shoot house. And they said that the problem was when they get in there, they're so disoriented for like the first hour that it takes out like 10% of their training. So yes, there's no substitute for the actual training, but it doesn't have to be an end-all be-all. So they want to do is come up with a system. So it's just to get them acclimated, to be able to, and not to so disoriented when they get in there. So if they can even save a couple of hours within whatever that simulation is, good enough, right? It didn't have to be everything, but because they were so expensive, that developing a system to actually allow them to optimize the actual physical training was big savings for them.
Any question?
I just wanted to mention that at Fort Hood, we were faced with a real issue, and that is medics are hungry and they need to learn how to treat a patient with sucking chest wound. What they have to do is go back and work on a mannequin, $100,000 mannequin, back at the medical center in Darnell. We saw this issue through the MTech, the Medical Technology Enterprise Consortium, and we work with companies, startups and high-tech firms, help them develop their proposals so they can provide a solution. We work with Medcognition, and they've developed software for the Microsoft HoloLens that the medic can then put on while he's at his Humvee. He gets off and sees the patient on the ground, and now you tell him he's got a sucking chest wound, what do you do? And he tells the instructor who has a tablet what his next solution is, what his solution is, what his next step is, and every time he provides it, he sees a different reaction in the patient. So this is a potential solution using augmented reality.
We were doing a program with that same program I mentioned. We were also working with hospitals. They have the same training mannequins. And so they're talking about how do we use civilian dollars as well as military dollars to solve the same problem. Yeah.
Excellent. All right, I'm going to go way over here to someone raising your hand patiently.
Hi. So you were talking about your training simulations and them having maybe graphics and physics that would lend a hand to support like dead spaces or how to figure out if it's an enemy or not. What is the audio support looking like for future simulations?
So obviously in real life you can hear, you can see, you can smell, you can taste, you can feel, right? So if I walk into a room, I can visually see this room, but I might also be able to, okay, I hear someone breathing, but I don't see someone, there's someone in here, okay? So I instinctively know to be more on guard. I might be able to hear them moving around or slightly shifting on the floor, okay? I know they're probably crouched or laying down. Where in a simulated environment, currently, there's no in-depth audio output. We can't hear anything like that. Obviously, we'll never get to the point where, hey, we can smell them because, you know, not normal. We won't get into that. But there are certain aspects that could be implemented into the CCTE that we currently just do not have. Like more high-depth sound design, right? So like I mentioned, you know, in real life, you can hear someone moving around. And at CCTV, that's not generally the case. So I hope that helps answer the question.
Lots of opportunity for everybody out there. With that in mind, I'd like to invite Colonel Lynn Rosenoff back to the stage here. So a little something for you gentlemen before we end here.
Hey folks, I hope you've enjoyed this. This is going to be one of many opportunities where you're going to see really Army Applications Lab facilitating this. And what this is, in my mind, is what we do, and that's industry, the end user soldiers, and the folks that own the problems. And when you can put that together, special things happen, as you've heard today. This will be one of many instances, and on behalf of Army Applications Lab, I just want to give you a small token of our appreciation. Mike, thank you. Cody, special response. Thank you very much, guys. Guys, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. All right. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. Thanks as well to our partner Capital Factory for all the help. Keep in mind that our Army Applications Lab is partnering with similar accelerators, incubators, and other innovation programs. So please connect if you know folks that we should be talking with. Also, for those of you interested in engaging with us, learning more, definitely check out aal.army. Believe it or not, I've been trying to explain that when you're in the startup world, you tell somebody to go to a website that's telling them to go away, but right now that's actually our best process, so please check that out. Also, our open house, we've got some fantastic demos in there, continues for the rest of the afternoon and evening. Please join us and continue the conversation. We're just around the corner in the AAL branded space. You can't miss it. So thanks so much for joining us today. Another big round of applause for our special guest.
Yeah, where did you go? I were talking, she was mentioning you. We had lunch together. I said to her, I said, I'm sick of Walter. She's like, you're like, I wasn't shocked. I wasn't shocked that they picked up a guy like you because we talk. I know, but it was just like, it was like, man. And then I realized as we talked, the priority of it. Yeah, like, come on. So, yeah, big part of why I'm here is we came in with this Thank you. So what happened was we met, yes, we met last night at a party for that. And then we had a short and I literally got ready to listen. I was like, crap, I reached out to any of those guys. So anyways, I'm here. I work here. I literally work here. So just 2 of them before him and I did it. Wow. That's a fun but hey, weekends, you're saying, right? Your weekends are here. I just lost the business. So I'm so they say, why don't you come down okay, so I'm at 3:30 I'm going to be here the whole night. I'll be here. Look at you working like a bee.